Hello, this is Patricia from patriciafenty.com, and this is part 2 on how to make this really funky granny square bag, this boho style granny square bag. And in part 1, I show you how to make the bag itself, the granny squares, how to join them together. We have a round motif that we're using for the bottom of the bag. And then we make the bag itself. We do the band across the top and cut out the lining. In part 2, I will be showing you how to sew the lining, how to put the lining in, how to make these straps, and then how to put them in. And also there's the option to do some beading with the tassels if you like. So for part 1, check the description box below for a link to that tutorial, and now we'll continue with part 2. So now we're going to sew the lining together. So you want to take your panel and put right sides together. So for me, the white is going to be the inside of the bag, and that's considered the right side because I want to have this seam allowance on the inside of the bag nice and smooth. So I'll sew a 1/2 inch seam allowance and then trim it with a zigzag stitch. This will be between the crochet bag and the inside of the bag, so the seam won't show. It'll be between the two fabrics. If you want, you can hand stitch this, and I do have a tutorial on how to hand stitch a lining. That will be in the blog post in the description box below. So go ahead and sew that seam, whether by hand or by machine, and then we'll come back and we'll put the bottom on. All right, so I have the seam sewn together, and of course this will be the inside of the bag. And now one thing you want to consider is that this type of a crocheted bag, the bottom of it doesn't have a lot of support. So you'll need to put something in the bottom of the bag, a round shape of some sort, to give it some stability at the bottom of the bag. When I was little, my mom made bags similar like this for lunch bag, and she just used a bleach bottle, and that fit perfectly in the bottom of the bag. So some sort of a plastic bottle that you could cut the bottom, or the lid of containers. I have the lid of a frozen yogurt container, and that's a perfect size. So I'll just put that in the bottom of the bag. I also have this brie packaging, and that fits perfectly in the bottom of the bag. But if you don't have anything that fits in the bottom, you can just cut 2 panels of your base fabric and then find some soft plastic, like the cover of a notebook or something like that. You can cut a piece of soft plastic, the circumference of this minus the seam allowance, and sew that panel between the 2 pieces of fabric, and then attach that round base onto the upper piece. But there are all sorts of lids and containers that you can use for the bottom of the bag to give it some support. So next we will put the bottom on. Now you can either eyeball this or you can mark it, and you can just put a little pencil mark at this point here, fold it in half and make it into quadrants, like 4 sections. So fold it in half and put a pencil mark on each side, and then fold it in half again, line up those pencil marks and mark it again. So then you're dividing it into 4 even sections, and there you go. So you've got like 4 quadrants. And then you can do the same thing on your panel. So this is folded in half, so that's 1 center piece. So you can mark there and put a mark there and a little mark in there. Again, you don't have to do this, but it does give you a guideline to evenly work the fabric in. And you want to take your pin cushion. If you haven't seen the tutorial on this pin cushion, I'll put a link to that too. So again, you'll put right sides together, the inside color together, whichever you have. And so you'll line up one of your marks of the round piece with one of the marks of the upper panel. And then we'll go over to this side and line up those 2 marks. And I'm keeping the pins to the inside. And then do that again, lining up those 2 marks so that you have these 4 even quadrants. And then on the other side, you line up those marks there. So now the circle is centered evenly within the panel. And now you just ease each quadrant. You'll just divide each quadrant in the middle, and you'll have a bit of bulky fabric, but you can just ease that in. If you want, you can do a basting stitch to help ease that in. I'm just going to pin it in half and then ease it in again and pin it in half and do that again and pin it in half. And there'll be a bit of bulk that you'll be sewing in, but that'll be fine. So do that for all the quadrants all the way around. And then when you're done, it'll look like this, and you can take this to the sewing machine and sew your 1/2 inch seam allowance, trim it, and do a zigzag finish, or you can hand sew it if you like. So I'll go do that, and then I'll be back. Great, so that's all done, and I did forget to mention about putting a pocket in if you like, and I do talk about that in part 1. So once you have the lining all done, you can take your crochet bag and you want to fit the lining inside the bag, and you're lining up the seams at the bottom. So there you go. Just sort of use your finger to match up those seams at the bottom and work it in nice and evenly. And then lay it flat. And then you just want to sort of make sure it's fitting in there nice and secure. And then you can just sort of stretch it out there around the band, and there we go. So then you can just take a pin and mark that spot at the very top of the crocheted bag, and you're going to use that as a guide for where we're going to make the fold. So you'll be turning this over a 1/2 inch, just, or 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch, whatever you like, and then you'll turn it over again, and you want that fold to be just a little bit shorter than the fold line. So it's a little bit shorter than the bag itself. So that's maybe 1/8 of an inch or so shorter than the bag. And then you would pin that all the way around and make this top hem all the way around, and then you'll do a top stitch there to finish off that hem to the inside of the bag. So go ahead and do those pins, and I'll show you what it looks like before I sew it. Here we go. I have it all pinned, and then you want to put it back inside the bag, inside the crochet bag, to make sure it fits, and this fits very nicely. And the colors are a little bit dark to see, but what you have is your lining is sitting just a little bit below your last round of single crochet, that bright navy color. And so it's sort of right in the middle of that. So you can go ahead and stitch that hem of your lining, and then while you're at the sewing machine, put the lining back inside your crocheted bag, line it all up and pin it in place. And then what you'll do is you want to leave that little bit of a lip at the top of the crocheted section. And from the front side, this is going to be hard to see because these colors are so dark, but you have your row of bright navy and the row of indigo. And right in between this row of single crochet and this row of single crochet, you'll see on your bag, you'll do a top stitch all the way around with your sewing machine and that is going to attach your lining to the crocheted bag. So you can do that while you're at the sewing machine. So I'm going to do that. I'll go ahead and hem the lining here and then sew it to the bag just like that. So we'll see you when we get back. All right, so here we go. That's nicely stitched. So the lining is all attached to the bag now, and this makes such a difference on these crocheted bags to have a lining in there. Now the next step is to do one more row of top stitching to make the casing for the drawstring to go into. So you can pin the lining to the crocheted bag down below here just to keep it nice and secure. And then you'll do one more row of top stitching between this row of bright navy and this row of indigo. Just like you did up here, you're going to do it down here and do a row of top stitching. And this might be a bit wonky where these seams are, but do your best to keep that a fairly straight seam. And then I'm actually going to change my bobbin thread to white because I don't want the blue thread to stand out inside the bag. The inside of your bag might be denim color, but I'm going to change that to white. So go ahead and do that row of top stitching. There we go. So that is all done. The lining is sewn in. We have a casing for our drawstrings. And I've put the little plastic lid in the bottom, which gives it some nice support at the bottom of the bag. I also did a hand steam of the bag. I find hand steaming works really good for this. So now the next step is to make the drawstrings for the bag, and I'll show you how to do that now. So you will need 2 drawstrings for the bag, for the top of the bag, and I will show you how to crochet them. I've already crocheted this one up. Now if you're using a fiber other than cotton, if you're using a synthetic fiber, I don't know that that will be strong enough to be a durable handle. So you may want to play with that and see. If not, you can just use some cording from the fabric store. You could also use the fabric from your lining and make a couple of drawstrings from the fabric lining. That would work too. So what you want to do is you can use a tape measure for this. You can just measure the width of your bag and then add another 6 to 8 inches. I believe I added 8 inches. So the total for this is, this is 19 inches, and so you multiply it by 2, and so that's a 38-inch piece. And you want to leave really long tails so that you can do some beads on the end. So we'll crochet this next. So I've made this cording using the bright navy and the indigo colors, and it's quite dark, so I will demonstrate with different colors here. But that's the colors I'm using to make this cording. But I'll show you using the indigo and the blue jean. So what you want is 2 strands of each color, so you can pull a strand from the front of your ball of yarn and from the back of your ball of yarn. So you'll have 4 strands all together. You'll bring those together and you're going to create a slip knot and leaving a fairly long tail for your beading for the tassels. That's totally up to you. And so create a slip knot. Now this looks a little bulky, but trust me, it will work out. So you put that loop on your hook and leave it a little bit loose there. And you're going to then separate your strands, so you'll have one color to the top and one color to the bottom, and that's the way you'll always work. You'll always keep the same color to the top and bottom. So this first stitch is a little tricky, so you'll bring the bottom yarn over top of the hook, creating a loop. Hold that with your finger and bring that forward. And then you'll bring the yarn on the top over top and towards you and pull that through all 4 loops. And then you'll repeat that again. You'll bring the bottom yarn over top of the hook, create a loop, hold that with your finger, bring the top yarn over top of the hook from the top to the front and pull that through the 2 loops. And then again, the bottom yarn over top in this direction and the top yarn coming from the other direction and pull that through. So again, so you essentially are creating a loop with your bottom strands, and then the top one is your crochet strand, just like that. And so you're just going to do that all the way along, bottom yarn over top of the hook, away from you, making a little loop, top yarn towards you, over top of the hook, and pulling that one through the 2 loops on your hook. So that's how you do it, and it seems sort of awkward at first, but once you get going on it, you really do get into a rhythm, and you're just going to crochet along and make this cord as long as you need to. So if you want, you can do it the same as me and make it 38 inches. I wouldn't make it any shorter than that. You might want to make it longer so you have a longer handle. So you just carry on making your strand, oops, come on, just crocheting along like that, and it makes a very durable cord. And then for the end, all that you do is you leave a fairly long tail, and then it's line them up, and you just fasten off like you would normally fasten off. Yarn over, pull that all the way through, snip your tails and pull it through and snug it up. I'm not going to cut this because I'm going to unravel this. But then once you do, what you do is you take each end and you tie a little square knot on each end, and then your strap is ready to go. So go ahead and make 2 of those, and I'll show you how to feed it into the top of the bag. All right, once you have your cords crocheted, we'll string it in through the top of the bag. So I've already done the one on this side. So we have it going in this direction with the loop on the one side, and you're skipping those 3 double crochets there. You're coming out of the chain 1 space and going into the other chain 1 space. So I'll show you to do it in this direction. And so what you want to do is just use a safety pin at the end of the cord, and that helps you to feed it through the casing. Then we'll actually go in this direction so that the loop will be on this side. Oh, I'm going to turn this around because I'm right-handed. So you're going in from the direction that your loop is. The tails are on the left side there. So you go in from the loop end, and you'll ease this into the casing and work it along, and it'll be a bit of a tight fit, but it'll work through. But yeah, and so you just work it through and feed it through gently, and then once you get to the end here, you can just pull it out of that chain 1 space and pull this cord, the strapping, all the way through, and then leave a tail at the one end. And then you'll come around, skip those 3 double crochets and go back into the chain 1 space on the other side and feed it in through that side, just like you did. And then coming through to the end of the casing, you're coming out of the chain 1 space, and just pull that through, and there we go. I can take that off now. And so now you have these 2 straps here, and just want to even them out, straighten out the ends. And so you have this end here and this end here. Then what you want to do is tie these into a knot and just even them out nicely. And then you want to make this a fairly tight knot at the end. So you just do a loop around your fingers, and this might take a little bit of fussing. Pull the tails through, and you want to work this knot snug and down to the very, very end of the cord. I know I'm calling it cord and strap, but just work it and try to work as much of the bulk out of it as possible, and just fuss with that. I'm just going to work it down a little bit more. There we go. And you'll repeat that on the other side as well. And yeah, and then I'll be back. Okay. And so once you have your knots tied, you just pull it out so that the knots are snug up against the bag and the handles are to the outside. And then in order to close the bag, you just pull those two handles together, and then you have your handles here. And then now what we can do is we can decorate these tassels here with some beads. And you can do this if you like, or you can just trim these off and make them all the same length, or you can braid them, or you can do any number of things with your tassels here at the end. But I'm going to string some beads on and play around with that. And the best thing to do if you're going to string beads on is to dab the end of each piece of yarn with a bit of white glue, let it dry so that you're creating a needle of sorts. I don't actually have any here right now. I'll just wet the end of the yarn here and see if I can string a bead on. And yeah, it doesn't really want to go through, but if you do put a little bit of white glue on the end, let it dry, it'll be much easier to string your beads on. And you can put the beads on in any creative way that you like, and when you have the arrangement you like, you'll just tie a little knot at the end so the beads don't fall off. There we go. And then you can snip your little ends off like that. So I'll put an assortment of beads on here, and I'll come back for the final reveal. All right, here we go. I have the handles all put in, and I put beads on the ends of the tassels here, and I just sort of tapered them in length, and the bag just opens up nicely like that. And the lining is so very nice. I just have some scarves in there to sort of bulk it up. And there we go. And you just draw it closed like that. And then of course the bottom has that yogurt lid to give it a nice firm bottom. And so there you go. Isn't that such a lovely crocheted bag? I think that just turned out so beautifully. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more creative and inspiring videos. We'll see you next time.